Is this thing on? Good evening. If you can, please find a comfortable spot, take a seat. Kind of angled here. This is awkward because you're not going to be able to see these folks. Oh, that's nice. Yeah. You're going to have a. You should come up here with me. Keep me honest. I hope we're not going to be too intrusive. This is kind of blocking this side, but I think that's okay. We'll make sure that you hear. Yeah, that's a liability issue we need to talk about. Where's General Counsel? We're okay. All right. All right. Well, welcome everyone. My name is David Wilson. I'm the Dean of the Goldman School of Public Policy at the University of California, Berkeley, and a professor of public policy and political science. I've been dean at the Goldman School for a year and a half. I'm new to California, but I'm excited that this is one of the first opportunities we've had to have a large public event in the DC area post-pandemic. And so this is an exciting time for us to be engaging you on an important topic and an intractable problem. It really is exciting to see you all here. I think that the buzz during the cocktail hour was great, and that this is where we get an opportunity to do what we do best, and that's connect and network, talk about these tough problems that we all have spent some time thinking about or studying, sharing discoveries, which we'll do some more of this evening, and in general, building community. That's one of the most powerful elements of the University of California, Berkeley, is that we are a community. We do believe that we can all change the world, and so we consider ourselves to be change makers in general. Before we get started, I'd like to thank Rob Tobiasen. Rob hooked us up with this terrific venue. He's a member of the Press Club. He graduated from Cal with a degree in political science, North Asian Studies, Regional Studies. Wonderful. I won't say the year, 2021 or something like that. Right? Yeah. He's also the president of the National Association of Beverage Importers. Just a reminder, that's important, right? Just a reminder, drink responsibly. Yeah, there'll be cards outside that say drink responsibly, right? The Press Club is a very important venue. This place has served some of the most prominent and important figures in our history. It's a gathering place for journalists and media professionals. It's hosted presidents, kings, queens, prime ministers, cabinet members, members of Congress, and now it's hosted the graduates of UC Berkeley and some of our esteemed faculty members. So please, thank you, Rob, for helping us put on this event and connecting us with the Press Club. Here we have some current students in the house tonight. Any current students here? Oh, come on, you can do better than that. Go Bears. Good job. We do consider our students to be the heartbeat of the university, and when you graduate, you become an alum. Are there any alums in the house tonight? Let me hear the alums with a big Go Bears. Go Bears. That's exactly right. It's wonderful. That'll be a chorus for the rest of your life. Get ready for it. Airports, restaurants, everything. I'd like to also acknowledge the hardworking staff that have helped put this together. It's not just simply reserving a space and showing up. We know it takes a lot of logistical support. So to all our staff members, please raise your hand from Rausser College of Natural Resources, Goldman School, the University Development and Alumni Relations team, our alumni group. Very good. Please give them a round of applause for making sure that we can have this event and pull it off successfully. I know, David, you're here doing work on behalf of the university system-wide, as I understand it, the UC Ag and Natural Resources Group.
Running around Capitol Hill.
Running around Capitol Hill, free of charge. I know you've met with legislative staff, and I hear that you've been sharing good research on the work we're doing, so thank you for your service, and we appreciate you coming and representing the university. Typical housekeeping items before we get started. Please silence your cell phones because we're recording tonight's event for those who couldn't be with us. Also, I'll be serving as moderator for the panel, and we've got some questions that we received in advance of the meeting, but we'll make sure that we reserve time to take some questions from the audience in advance. Anything I'm missing? We're all good?
By mic.
Oh, that's right. When we get to the question and answer part, and I'll probably remind us, they'll pass around a microphone. Just make sure you speak into the microphone because we're recording the event tonight. So let me introduce the panel. David Ackerley is Dean of the Rausser College of Natural Resources, where his research is used to inform strategies of biodiversity conservation in the face of climate change with a focus on California parks and open space. Dean Ackerley received his BA in Biological Sciences from Yale and his PhD in Organismic and Evolutionary Biology from Harvard. When I first said organismic, I had to practice that over and over again.
Never happened before.
Go Bears, yeah. Eliza Berkeley is a climate editor for New York Times Opinion. Formerly, Eliza was a science and health editor at Vox.com. And before that, she was co-editor at National Public Radio. Wow. NPR's, and you were co-editor of NPR's food vertical, The Salt, and wrote about food, health, and science for NPR. That's a big deal. Like many of you, she is also a proud alum of the Rausser College of Natural Resources, and you received your BS in Conservation and Resource Studies. Is that correct? All right. Dr. Louise Bedworth is Executive Director for UC Berkeley's Center for Law, Energy, and the Environment, otherwise known as CLEE. And is a senior advisor for the university's California China Climate Institute. I have visited there at least once and met with Jerry Brown, who I know is important for that. She served as deputy director of the Office of Planning and Research under Governor Jerry Brown, and also held positions at the Public Policy Institute of California, PPIC, and the Union of Concerned Scientists. Louise has a bachelor's from MIT and a master's in environmental engineering and a PhD in energy and resources from UC Berkeley. Wonderful. Dr. Christy Pullen-Fidenik.
Yeah, great.
Did I get it right?
Yeah,
Fidenik, I'm sorry. You're currently executive director of the Center on Earth, Energy, and Democracy. Up until recently, she served as chief science officer for the NRDC and has over 20 years of experience working at the intersection of science, public policy that's designed to advance data-driven health protective policy solutions. She's a product of UC Berkeley, where she received a PhD in biochemistry, biophysics, and molecular biology. Can you do that?
Apparently. I hope so.
Put us all to shame. So let's dive right in. Are we ready for this? So the first topic is about strategy on climate change. And I know a lot of folks in this room have thought about this and would love to weigh in, but let's start with Dean Ackerley. Tell us how you think the university can contribute to addressing some of the existential, the big ones, existential dilemmas of our lifetime around climate change.
All right, well, let's start with the small topics.
Yeah.
So first of all, a huge thanks to David Wilson. He's been a wonderful colleague. And also, it's really wonderful to do events together like this. We were in New York with the Dean of the Business School this week as well. And it speaks to the spirit at Berkeley right now, which is enormously collaborative. And that is necessary for the challenges we're tackling. There are about 18 deans at Berkeley. We lose track sometimes. Essentially, everyone has at least a faculty member, if not, who is working on climate, or it can be everything up to a major strategic priority for them. So the commitments of the university are spread across every single unit and division, and we don't have time to talk about what all those connections are, but we'll be touching on them. And there's 59 gigatons of carbon being pumped into the atmosphere every year, and we'd like to get to zero. And we don't have a lot of time, and we can come back and talk more about that. But really briefly, what do universities do? One of our challenges is that universities are not often are not seen as nimble actors in society. We're here for the long haul. We'll be here. But how do we couple the timescale of the university with the urgency of the problem? And really briefly for me, I'd say it's threefold. There still are major discoveries that are needed. There is blue sky, crazy science that we need, engineering, to come up with solutions that we don't know yet. Universities are the stage zero, if you think in venture capital terms, before things are even ready to get into even early stage in marketplace. And that's what happens in the university. There's other solutions we need that are really like what I would call common good solutions. There may not be a market for them. There's things we need to do in the world, and maybe government will ever be the only actor who will pay for it. And this is what universities do for the world. A lot of the nature-based solutions fall into this category. We don't know if there will be a market for nature-based solutions in terms of soil, farm action, soil management, forest management. We know there are things that need to get done. And there we get closer to the ground and sort of more urgent, closer to that urgency. And then it's about policy, law, and we'll pass on with this. Policy can make a difference tomorrow. Law can make a difference tomorrow, and we inform those decisions. And then we educate. And, we take students in, and 4 years later, we set them loose in the world, or sometimes less than 4 years. So I think, as I reflect on it, I think we move faster than we give ourselves credit for in terms of the influence we have. We put people out in the world quickly. We look at the problems and advise governments, advise on policy, and then we do the basic research, and some of that pays off in the longer haul. But it's across the board, across all those levels of work that we do.
When you think about who would be the ideal partner with the Rausser College to help accelerate some of the attention on climate change, whether it's public, private, nonprofit, international, individual, who would be your ideal partner for something like that?
Oh, it would be unfair to pick one, because really I think our strategy is really at least twofold, in the sense that if you think about the work on climate equity, environmental justice work, the partners are going to be community groups and environmental justice groups working in frontline communities. But other partners will be private sector companies that could be looking for for-profit applications of the work we do. So it's this whole spectrum. So I don't think it wouldn't even be fair to what we do to say that we pick one across that spectrum.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to stay busy. Dr. Bedworth, a growing number of people are saying that it's already too late to turn around climate change, and that the planet will be unlivable for a majority of the world's population by mid-century. They say that we should focus on adaptation. What do you think? If we can still make a meaningful change, tell us what kinds of efforts you think are possible, or is it too late?
Wow, I don't think we'd all be here if we thought it was too late. So I think the answer is no. I think the answer is we have to do it all. We need to be adapting and preparing for the impacts of climate change that we're already experiencing, but we have to laser focus on implementation right now. We have a tremendous amount of resources that are flowing from the federal government and in California from the state government to implement solutions. And that is going to take working at all scales. So we have the state, but local government, private sector, individuals. And so at CLEE, sort of within the university, we sit at that boundary of really how do we take the expertise of all of our law school colleagues, but across campus broadly, and translate them into policy and action. And so I think that's the key area, is whether we're looking at preparing for impacts or reducing emissions, that we're focused on implementing solutions. So, and making sure that we're taking every dollar we have that's coming down and making it have the impact we need it to have at the pace that we need it to be moving. Mm-hmm. So I would say we just have to keep moving as quickly as we possibly can, and as that blue sky science is happening, figure out how we're translating it out into solutions and into the world.
All right, I'm going to push you in the same way I did Dean Ackley. If you think about the federal, state, and local level, where are the strongest opportunities, ideally, for some of the implementation work? Because, of course, implementation in the we part of it is very broad, but how can we have more direct impact, state, local, federal?
I think a key point of focus right now should be at the local and community scale. I think building those solutions from the ground up in ways that are going to work for people is critical. So we have incredible frameworks in place, particularly in California, where we have the regulatory framework, the legal and the policy framework. And now we need to figure out how do we make it work on the ground? What are the key pieces that we need so that we're electrifying every house in California, that we are getting electric vehicles out, that we are, getting people to make choices about taking transit, that we're doing nature-based solutions. All of that comes down to a very fine-grained level. So we need to be focusing our attention at that scale, I think, to really get the ground-up action to meet the frameworks we have coming down.
Very good. Editor of Berkeley, Eliza. Assuming that new laws, policies, and regulations are required in order to compel it, which ones do you think are most necessary? In your work, as you're thinking about what's happening in the field, where are the greatest opportunities? Which ones are most likely to occur? Which activities are going to face challenges but may have good impact? Where do you see the priorities?
Well, we're actually also pretty focused on implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act as a major kind of storyline of
Policy.
2023. And so I would say that those policies, like where that policy does incentivize all kinds of different people, businesses to change and offers them, tax benefits and different kinds of opportunities to maybe change their homes or revolutionize how they do business or invest in new technologies. But I think that we're trying. So we do a combination, like in storytelling about this, between pulling back and trying to help our readers like really understand the big picture here, because I do think that Americans don't really get yet what a big deal the Inflation Reduction Act is, what it means. And so we did do a piece a few weeks ago pointing out that this is, in fact, a massive experiment. It's an experiment in two ways. It's we're figuring out if we can actually, change the energy markets and push renewables forward, hopefully eventually stop using so many fossil fuels, but also it's a massive economic experiment. And I'm just trying to point that out, that even like a lot of academics, I think, maybe in climate world, people understand what a big deal this is, but in a lot of other fields, they don't. And then I think so we're doing a lot of pulling back, but then I also think we're thinking through what are the questions that average people have, how are they going to be interfacing with this? And my colleagues who work on the news side are doing stories about more sort of how-to stories, but so I commission pieces that are opinions and arguments. And so I was actually just talking to Louise earlier today. She was saying, it's so hard to electrify my house, and I was like, I hear that a lot, right? And so we were just talking through a possible argument there about, why is it so hard? Why is it so hard to get an induction stove? Why is it so hard to figure out if you can get a heat pump and then switch it out? What are all the barriers that stand between a lot of people? When does this going to make sense for most people to be able to take advantage of these things? So, but I think about it in terms of what is the spicy argument that can help our readers really just like understand and connect with these ideas.
Let's stay on that for a second. Is it scaring people? Is it informing them? Is it telling them how it's going to affect their daily life? What does the average person not think about that they should think about with regard to climate change?
I mean, I would say our goal is not to specifically to scare them, but if the facts are scary, so be it, right?
But is that persuasive? I mean, if we're trying to move the needle and get people to be more attentive to the issue, what is the typical strategy, the typical story that actually works, that moves people to action? Yeah,
that's a great question. I would say that we're not trying necessarily to change behavior, right? As journalists, we're trying to tell a range of stories and bring in a range of perspectives. But some of those stories are, in fact, people who are able to make major change. I commissioned one of my favorite pieces last year was a guy who he's like I thought of him as like the energy policeman in his office building, and he was his company, his organization, which was like an energy organization, but they had a net zero goal, and so he was going around trying to figure out, what can I unplug this coffee maker that's running too much? And so anyway, I found it to be an inspiring story, right, of somebody who figured out how to help his organization hit this net zero goal. Yeah. And I think we need to hear like those people who are in the trenches, but we also need to hear people on the front lines of climate change who are suffering, right, and don't necessarily who are just trying to survive. So it's a combination.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Dr. Pullen Fedenik, I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm from Nashville, I'm sorry. from the South, we don't read much. Tell us about how your center is working to influence public sentiment on climate change. I study public opinion, or used to practice it for a living, and I'm really curious about how maybe you might be moving or studying public opinion or public sentiment, and maybe elaborate on some policies that you think, some current policies or ideas that may be effective at moving sentiment.
Yeah, that's really a great question. I think that for my organization, so I'm the executive director for the Center for Earth, Energy, and Democracy. We're a small environmental. I'm gonna have some feedback here. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Okay, it's kind of a weird mic. Oh. No worries. It's all good. Thanks. I like to hold something, so this is really wonderful. I actually sabotaged that myself.
You especially like to hold checks.
Yeah,
too,
thank you.
right?
I feel like I should break into a song now. So that's how you sway public opinion. Thank you. No, so the center that I lead, the Center for Earth, Energy, and Democracy, is an environmental justice allied organization. And so what that means is that we provide technical assistance and other types of tools to environmental justice communities, and particularly environmental justice organizations, to help them not only understand the issues that they're facing, and they know what the issues are. They can see the pollution, outside of their homes. They can, they go to the hospital with their infant that has nasal, pharyngeal cancer, and so they know the issues that are that they're facing. And so, really being able to utilize technical tools to help, to create information that can be shareable and is persuasive in trying to shift the needle on, say, particularly local policy, but even at the federal level. And so I think that when we're talking about the most important policies that we really think a lot about, is we've had this massive reinvestment of money under the Inflation Reduction Act, but also the bipartisan infrastructure law, a number of other big federal funding opportunities. But even embedded within that is Justice 40, really thinking about the reinvestment of money for communities that have disproportionately suffered from a lack of investment. And so with our community partners that we work with, we engage in a public education, popular education paradigm, and popular education is one in which you're seeking to liberate the folks that are part of that process. There's no teacher-student, it's really a co-learning, and that liberation helps one to realize that they exist in a certain reality. And if you understand your reality, you can also see the malleability of that reality. And so helping folks to understand, what the historic issues have been, what the future goals are, what the current state is, and how we can leverage current funds, through the various mechanisms that are available, some for community-based organizations, some through specific state actions, et cetera, and other federal ways in which the money's coming down, to help them change the environments in the ways that they would like to change them.
Very cool. Well, let me ask you this: when you were a student at Berkeley, maybe you didn't think about climate change as much. Was there something that you took for granted as a student that now that you would tell yourself to do differently?
Gosh, that's a good one. I would say at Cal, I didn't think about environment at all. I was a biochemist. I worked on tuberculosis and proteins within tuberculosis. I worked on RNA viruses, so it really made the last couple of years a really interesting time, And, I came into this work really by accident in a way. So I finished my PhD and went to do a postdoc at the Harvard School of Public Health, where it was this unique program that was really trying to bring people into population health. And so, I worked on computational biology. I designed psychology experiments. I really just want to pick up different disciplines because I just kind of, love that piece of learning.
Clearly.
Yeah, clearly, right. And, but when I was coming out of my postdoc, I was really just trying to figure out how I could do science in action. Mm-hmm. And that was the thing I was really drawn toward. And when I was coming out of my postdoc, I was literally throwing spaghetti at the wall to figure out what was going to stick. And I got a position at a small environmental nonprofit in Chicago. And at the time, they were looking for an ecologist. But again, persuasive writing, I said, what you think you need is an ecologist. What you actually need is me. Right. So I got the job, I think probably because I was inexpensive, but I'm going to say that it was because I was influenced. I had that persuasive writing. But when I came into that work and was able to, I taught myself GIS, again, picking up tools to really be able to, so using mapping systems and, coding and other things to really try to give pictures and image for what's happening in the environment. And the thing that drew me to structural biology was creating an image of something that no one else had ever seen before. Mm-hmm. We knew that it existed. We knew that it must work in some way, but being able to visualize that thing. So it really led me into this field. And it's something as though, you know, sometimes the universe calls to you and you don't even realize that it's calling, and you pick up that phone call and you realize you should have been there the whole time. And so, you know, I think that the journey for me has been one of, you know, really just being open to where things were going to take me. And at Cal, I sat in on political science classes and public health classes and was in the lab 7 days a week, you know, but I think that the ability to be able to explore and know that there was expertise in so many areas. You know, I took a piano class. It was just really a wonderful mind-opening experience that allowed me, I think, and prepared me to be open to where I was needed at that time.
That's really, really critical. Yeah.
Thank you. I planted her.
Dean Ackerley, when you were a student, an undergraduate in New Haven, what kinds of things were you not thinking about that you now can look back on and say, maybe I should have been? With regard to climate change, let's make that clear. Just food and beverage.
I don't think I can do this without dating myself. So in undergrad in the early 1980s, it's actually, there's kind of two sides to this. On the one hand, the basic effect of CO2 being a warming gas that traps heat in the atmosphere has been known since 1896. So there's this craziness that, you know, we've known this for a long time. So, but on the other hand, this didn't really come into the popular consciousness. If you really think about Jim Henson's testimony to Congress in 1985, 85 or 86, that's really the moment when it hits public consciousness, hits the front page of the New York Times. So early 80s, I would say I was in, you know, I grew up, spent a lot of time in nature. I love trees. I still love studying trees. And I just love studying ecology. And of course you study climate, because climate is part of life. Climate is part of how the Earth works. So there's nothing there, you know, and climate change has happened forever. That's not always used to in these debates in a very constructive way. What changed me is that I had an opportunity at the end of college. These are the moments that change your life. Walking down the hallway, internships in the Amazon, organizing meeting Monday night after dinner, you know, and I walk into a room and I go in and I get and spend a year in the Amazon. And it had two very large effects. One is my idealistic youth was shattered, because what I saw was poverty and people, you know, why was the forest being cut down? There were no simple reasons. There were no simple answers. There weren't bad guys and good guys. And in some ways, I actually went back to the biology because I felt like it was too complicated. And my idealism was kind of broken in a way that I didn't know what to do with, because I wasn't getting the education in activism or political science that I could do something with it. And then in grad school, I ended up in a lab that was doing some of the earliest work on the effect of CO2 on plants that was happening in the late 80s. And I took a roundabout route, but about 12 years ago, came to a moment in my career and said, you know, what will I feel made a difference? And just said, I'm going to work on climate change and I'll see where it leads. And I am, as any well-trained professor will know, I'm not answering his question. You will notice this, and I'll tell you just a little anecdote of that. One thing I said, again, about 12 years ago, I said, I'm going to start working on climate change. I like working locally. I'm going to work in California. And I'm going to say yes to any invitation I get to speak to anyone in the Bay Area. And that has been incredibly enriching. Getting at community groups, like I'll say that sometimes one of the most interesting was the volunteer-mounted horseback patrol of the East Bay parks.
They're a great group.
They're a great group. I mean, what a fascinating discussion. These people are deeply committed to their environment, right? So for me, what's been so meaningful is just as much as I can do just to be out and just talking to every audience that wants to talk about these problems and the exchange and the back and forth. And this has now been given a name. Now we call it community engaged research. And it didn't have a name 10 years ago, which is that we identify problems together. We don't just do it in the ivory tower. We identify the problems together. We co-create knowledge together. We co-share that knowledge together. And I won't say that I'm an expert at this, and certainly the university is far from any deep transformation, but it's happening. It is happening. It is changing the way we do research, changing the kind of questions we ask. And I guess it's taking us down the right path, we hope, in terms of the work we do.
We hope. Dr. Bedworth, when you were on your way to Cambridge, and I don't know where your hometown was, but when you were thinking about, were you majoring in environmental engineering or thinking about majoring in it, what kinds of things were on your mind? Like, what led you into this space?
Well, so I always knew I wanted to work on environment, quote unquote. You know, my parents would tell me sometimes I was like eating with your conscience or something, because I would always point out what was wrong with whatever. And so there was that. For me, I took a class when I was an undergrad that is the class I always go back to that changed what I wanted to do, which was called Scientists, Engineers, and Public Controversy. And it was basically about how, was a lot of focus at the time, to date myself again, I guess, like around Superfund. And it was a lot about how science is used in different ways, for good and for bad, and engineering, and how it affects people and their lives. And so I became committed to really looking at this interface of science and regulatory decision-making and policy. I took a circuitous path to get there via an engineering degree, which deepened my technical understanding. At the time, I will honestly say I don't think engineering was quite ready to have that conversation. And I was told at one point that we're engineers, we don't talk to people. And I was like, okay, well, that's going to be a problem because my dissertation is interview-based. So I was like, So I moved over to the Energy and Resources Group, which isn't, for folks who don't know, I mean, you're all many from Berkeley, an interdisciplinary graduate group that was designed to grapple with you can get a Master's of Arts, a Master's of Science, a PhD, and I think now an undergraduate minor. Yes. So it became such a wonderful home for me to explore in all these different ways how we are interacting and learning about and affecting the environment, and how science and engineering and policy and political science and sociology are all together. And I look back on the weekly graduate seminars as like one of my absolute best. Like, I want to try to recreate this again, of just how you're learning from all these people around you who are grappling with similar or related problems in a whole different way. So someone would be like, I'm taking all my classes in sociology and coming at it this way, or political science, or public policy, or economics, or engineering. And so for me, I kind of had an idea of what I wanted, but it was a little bit of a circuitous path to figure out how do you get to that space and find where you can have that creative systems approach and be surrounded by people who are really thinking about similar things but entirely different ways. And I find that to be just the most exciting part of sort of tackling these complex problems.
Very cool. Editor Barclay, you're a journalist. You're leading other journalists in thinking about this. How did you get into that space from being a conservation and resource studies major? What led you into journalism, and why is this issue so important to you?
Well, when I was at Berkeley, I didn't necessarily expect to become a journalist. And actually, one of my strong memories is I took a class called Urban Garden Ecosystems, and I think the Urban Garden, the CNR Urban Garden is still there. Yeah, so we just, this was a class where we just got to play around in the garden, and it was, worms and compost and hippie, delightful fun. And, you asked me a different question than you asked Dean Ackerley, but when I think back to those times, like, it was just a sort of wonderful, lighthearted era of, local food is great, and Alice Waters and the edible schoolyard. And I think back and I don't really remember a sense of urgency that I think now we really feel. And it was kind of it was a different era of being a student of environmental studies, and now I feel like the students they just have a very different weight on them in terms of the pressure of what is coming. But for me, it was a sort of gradual. I realized at a certain point I'd kind of like writing. I actually was going strange little twist of fate. Brief story, I was going to go to Peru with a friend on September 11th, and it was like a graduation trip that we had planned, and our flight out of SFO was grounded, and it turned out that my friend's boyfriend was very ill, so we decided to not go, and I had quit my job. I had been working for Marin County, and I had quit before the trip, and so I was sort of adrift, and I just decided to take a writing class at San Francisco at a clean, well-lighted place for books. And I took a writing class with a wonderful journalist and ended up, roaming around Oakland exploring the very early cannabis clubs, which now are everywhere. It was the dark,
Best place
the
to study
dark early
climate.
days. So anyway, that was just how I had the opportunity to learn that I liked reporting. And
Thank you for sharing.
there we go.
Good. We should all open up now.
Hippie delightful fun is our tagline.
Thanks for sharing. We're going to open it up for questions, but I got a quick speed round for this group of questions just to try and see if they're as smart as they say they are, especially you with 3 PhDs or PhD titles. Yep. David Ackerley, if you had a climate change power, what would it be?
Oh, if we could make one thing happen overnight.
If you had a climate change
If I had the
power.
power. No, if I had the power.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of talk
This
about
is a speed round.
speed round. Put all that carbon back in the soil where it came from.
Eliza, if you win a Nobel Prize, who introduces you?
I'm going to pass, sorry, but can I answer the other question?
Nope. You lose your turn. How about this one? What activity makes you lose track of time?
Oh, chasing my daughter around the house in circles.
Very good. You ready?
I hope so.
Okay. What was the last thing you honestly put 100% into?
Oh, so I just completed an application to the Department of Energy for a bipartisan infrastructure law funded program, and that took 120% of my energy and was 1,200 pages long, and it's why it's too hard to access federal money. So I didn't write all 1,200 pages, but we need to make this easier. And so that
60-second clips or something like that,
Yeah.
spots or something. All right, are you ready for this is the crucial one.
Yes.
If you're a bartender or a barista and you have to create a signature drink, what's in it and what will you call it?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think I would have just a plain tap water. I would call it H2O. And so it would give you facts about water, how you can help, get money from the state revolving fund to be able to improve lead, get rid of lead in community pipes across the country.
All right. Eliza, you get one more run. What's your climate change superpower?
Make oil not a profit. Eliminate oil profits. Make it not a profitable product.
How do you do that? How would you do it?
Superpower. No, it's a superpower.
One of these things,
It doesn't matter how, just.
It's not a superpower to say what you want to do. You got to say what the superpower is. We're going to all come back to
Destroy
class.
oil markets.
All right. With the brute strength. What professor, researcher, or organization transformed you the most at Berkeley?
Me?
Yeah.
ERG, the Energy and Resources Group.
The group? Who was the best person in the group that influenced you the most?
Oh, David wasn't there at the time. Wow. There were a lot of people, but probably Professor Gene Rocklin, who was political science, or I guess he was kind of political scientist. But he covered a lot of ground, and he introduced me to the field of science and technology studies, which was really transformative to how I did my work. So probably Gene.
Very good. David, coming back to you. If your mindset on climate change was a professional sports team, what would be its mascot?
We had a beagle as a kid. Their tails are always wagging, but they never let go of what they're going after.
Fighting Ackerley Beagles. I love it. Thank you. Please give our panel a quick round of applause on the speed questions. We're going to open it up for questions from the audience, and I believe we have microphones on left and right. So if you don't mind, please introduce yourself. Maybe quickly announce your connection to Berkeley or why you're here, and then we'll advance. Carl.
Hi, Carl. Yeah, Carl Hausker, Goldman School alumnus from way back. At first, I can't help asking answering one of your questions, David. How am I thinking differently than when I was in school? And when I was in high school, we had oil crisis number 1. Mm-hmm. It's like, we're running out of energy. When I was in college, it was oil crisis number 2 with Iran. We're running out of energy. But by the time I got out of Berkeley, it's like, no, we're running out of atmospheric space to dump all the CO2 from our energy consumption. So just a historical note.
Good, thank you.
My question for the panel is about permitting and siting. As I'm sure all of you know, we have to build a whole lot of stuff really fast. And the question is, how do we do that? Do we just give, we have problems at the federal level, state level, local level. Do we just move more power up to the state or federal level? Do we work more, more closely with communities to build the support from bottom up, to kind of use your metaphor? One wonderful Michigan researcher even suggested, like, don't have companies try to sell these projects. You have to have a more trusted person, like a county extension agent. Or is there a role for universities to be on the front end of trying to persuade communities that this project is clean, it's got jobs?
I'm going to ask
How do we solve that?
Dr. Pullen-Fidenik to respond to that one.
Sorry. Well, we can share. That'll be fine. So, maybe I just have a bad luck with microphones today. Yeah, this is it's a really important question. I can say, some of the things we shouldn't do, right? So we shouldn't erode, the laws that protect and give communities the opportunity to actually review and make comment on permitting decisions. I also think that we should, when we're thinking about permitting, that we should take into account communities that are already overburdened by pollution and not put, different types of technologies or, create or utilize existing infrastructure that's already polluting to then, potentially, also pollute those communities as well too, and I think that we really just, that bottom up approach, I think is really critical, and understanding what the needs are, not only in terms of our, our climate, our carbon mitigation, but thinking about adaptation, thinking about pollution reduction, making sure that we have actual processes that allow communities to have a say in what's happening to them. And so I think that oftentimes we don't, there's a bit of NIMBYism that happens. We say we need to increase transmission, we need to, have, hydrogen hubs and things around the country, but no one wants them in their backyard. And so how do we make sure that those aren't eroded, which is a really important step.
Other questions?
Just before we take it, I just want to add one other element, which is universities have to be very careful about the role they play. It is not the role of the university to enter into any dialogue and say, this is a good project, you should accept it. And if we do that, we'll undermine our role in society. We're the trusted convener. If we're not seen as a trusted source of information in what we do, our role is undermined. Having said that, it's a very, very fine line. Our faculty care deeply about the outcomes. The university as an institution has to be has to just stay at this place where we're not taking one side over the other, not pushing one position. So I don't have an answer, and I really do want to keep going with other questions, but I just want to comment on, it's not obvious the university can play the role that it might seem it could play. I mean, it's got a role to play, but it's a careful one.
I'm going to jump on that really quickly, because I think one thing we can do is help think about new models and new approaches for how we're doing these kinds of projects, and how do you operationalize something that is a more bottom-up approach? How do we think about new governance structures, so is it, different ownership models? There's a lot that we can really be thinking about, and I think the university is a great place to try to think about that and think about how you can make successful models replicable and things like that.
Thank you for interventions.
Hi, I'm Joan Ochi. I'm an alum of the College of Letters and Science. And when I was a student at Cal, I'd say interdisciplinary study was far less common than it is today. And, amongst you represent the law school and democracy, and knowing that some of your peer institutions, like Columbia, has created a climate school, I'm just curious at Berkeley how you connect the dots so you ensure that, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts.
Yeah. Dean Ackerley.
I will jump into that, because we spend a lot of time on this, and we're looking very closely at our peers. Actually, on this trip, I visited Harvard and Columbia to talk to some of our peers about what they're doing. And first of all, it's hard, and it's hard for institutions, no matter how big or small. And our other peers who are creating schools and this and that, when we go talk to them, turns out it's hard. So we're not in good company in the sense that what we want to do. Interdisciplinarity is is difficult. You know, we, like any institution, we have to have vertical org charts and this and that and procedures and all the other things, and then we're always working against them. I'll tell you, I think what Harvard is doing right now is what I would like to see us do, which is, first of all, very, very well funded interdisciplinarity, but really institutes can bridge units. Institutes, you know, sometimes that we hate them because we have now so many and they keep ballooning, and yet they deliver, and Louise can speak to that as a director of very, very successful centers and institutes. And then, frankly, there is no substitute for relationships. And we've spent a lot of time building the relationships, bringing people together in those meetings across disciplines so that you're creating the opportunities for new teams to create. And COVID made that very hard, so it's really nice to be back in that business. And we are investing quite a bit of energy internally, and you won't see any headlines about it because it's that internal building towards our future even greater successes.
Question?
Is it on? Hi, my name is Caroline Levinson, and I graduated from Berkeley in 1969, so that was a long period ago.
Great year.
But my question is, what can the university chain do to help create innovation, not only public policy, but actual innovation? We have somebody's figured out how to create concrete without the current problem with discharge and all. And several people, Australia, Japan, have come up with use of seaweed to decrease the amount of methane that's produced by cows. So there are so many individual things. What can Berkeley do to popularize students to go into coming up with new thinking? It's not only in agriculture or industry. It could also be figuring out how to make sure these windpipes don't kill birds and other things. But that's what I'd like to hear. What can the university do to encourage this growth, like what used to happen in the IT world?
Let's do internal and external perspective. Dr. Bedworth, you do internal to Berkeley, and editor of Berkeley, let's say we get your perspective on external.
I mean, I think there's a lot of exciting things that are happening in Berkeley, and innovations that are coming out of across campus. I think partnered research projects where you actually can see the impact. You can co-create a solution, see the impact, and see it be deployed is a really powerful way to engage people in going into those fields and seeing that you're not going to sit in a lab, you're not going to sit, that you can actually be part of a solution. And I get the sense the more students I talk to, and I have a sort of almost college-aged child, that's what's inspiring to her, and is to be in that space where you're really making an impact and having a difference. So I think sort of experiential projects, opportunities to engage in research, to work at a community scale. One thing we also operate at CLEE is we have an AmeriCorps program, and there's actually a second one on campus, and ours is called, but at CLEE it's called Grizzly Corps. We actually have recent college graduates come. We have 35 in this year's cohort. We put them in rural communities throughout California, and they're placed with resource conservation districts, utilities, and they're working on regenerative agriculture and wildfire resilience projects across the state. It has been incredibly successful. We do very targeted outreach, so we've got a very diverse group of fellows who are participating, especially a lot of groups who are not well represented in the natural resource management space, and seeing, we're 3 years into the program, seeing many of them getting hired by their agencies where they've been working, are continuing in that space either through education or profession. So I do think those kinds of projects and that kind of learning experience is incredibly powerful to get students going into these fields and doing that innovative work.
I would just add that, I think these stories of new technologies are there's a ton of new technologies, and a lot of them are really exciting, cool, I do think when we think about how do we cover them, if we should cover them, one of the big questions is, are they proven? Are they scalable? Has anyone actually scaled them yet? Can we show over, how much data is there? And when a lot of these, like there isn't that much yet. And that's one of the tensions. And then I also think sometimes we've looked at debates about particular technologies. There's a very juicy debate about carbon capture and storage. Some people think it's a good thing for the oil and gas industry to do in the short term. Other people think it's going to help prolong the industry. So we have done stories where with somebody who's like right in the middle of that debate, taking a hard stand on it. So I do think that's a way we can kind of educate people and enrich the public conversation, as like give people an opportunity, give readers an opportunity to understand that some of these technologies, there's a really, vigorous debate happening, and what is it?
Can I add really quickly?
Yeah.
Quickly.
So, I think that one of the other things that I like to think about, one of the greatest innovations in human history is hand washing. Right? I mean, when we really think about, the longevity of the human species increased, not exponentially, but at least doubled, because of a simple act of putting your hands together with a saponified fat and cleaning off bacteria. And so I think that we also need to challenge ourselves to really identify what's true innovation. And the things that I think universities should do is, any of your STEM fields, make sure that they're all taking a sociologist to lunch or going to, have drinks or dark cannabis lounges with an art history major. Because I think that this really is about seeing the world as it is, and there are solutions that exist. And so we tend to rely on our ingenuity, like our brains are going to solve this problem. But I also think that carbon sequestration from forests, we know they do that, right? And so do we need to create a new tree in order to do that, or do we just nurture the trees we have and grow more of them? So really just pushing ourselves to identify where true innovation is, and it doesn't have to necessarily be a technocentric one.
David, you have an elevator idea, or?
Well, all of that is true, and we're working hard to encourage our faculty to do blue sky research. One of the great things about Rausser College, which is what I enjoy so much about being dean, is we have the sociologists and the political economists and in the same college with plant biochemists and nature-based solutions folks. So that dialogue happens more easily, and bridging the interdisciplinarity, just being in the same unit helps a lot. But we have the inaugural vice chancellor of innovation and entrepreneurship on campus. We have a new bioingenuity hub where faculty can actually have a startup company in a research space right on the side of campus. It's not their research lab. We don't do that. You can't do a startup in your lab, but you can do a startup next door. Climate tech is emerging, and carbon capture. There is research going on campus right now on carbon capture that could be transformative in 10 years or could fizzle, and that's what we do. Right? I mean, it will be something. It won't fizzle. It will be something. And it may not be carbon. The same technology can take water out of the air, and there are new technologies that put a device the size of a coffee can on top of your house, and it can drip clean water into your house, taking water out of the air. And think about the applications around the world in places with no piped water. It's phenomenal. So it's all happening. And I think but what do we do? I mean, it's a whole series of things around how do we ensure intellectual property agreements? How do we make, faculty are motivated. They're motivated by those opportunities. But I, as a natural scientist, I will completely echo, we do have a love affair with technology at times, and sometimes the solutions are right in front of us. And we're not fully implementing the ones in front of us while we seek the new ones, and they deserve a lot of our attention.
Question here, and then we'll try and get to those.
They're GSPP 03 and 07 and Econ 04. I'm curious how we organize the right part of society to move into, enough of society, move into some kind of era of enough thoughtful, purposive, targeted action.
Eliza, you want to take that one? You're telling stories. You're talking to the public.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a political dimension to this. what are our political leaders saying? And some leaders are pulling people along, and some are not. And I guess I want. We were talking about this earlier too. Is it? Do we have to wait for the current generation of political leaders to move on before like a wider swath of society is much more engaged? I'm not sure, but that might be it. I also think that there's some real challenges around even just consumption and how much Americans consume, and I'm interested in what other people on the panel think about. We need major societal changes, and they can come from all different directions, and it's definitely not just political leaders who are going to get us there. But
we're going to try and get through some of the questions here. We have a number. Microphone up here. Oh, here we go. Sorry.
No problem. This is Alessia. Hi. Legal Studies, Law, 2010. Eliza, my question was very much related to yours. I mean, this is D.C., so it's a very political place, right? And a lot of times, like, you read the news or hear something, and it feels like, us against them, like Democrats against Republicans, right? Where it's like we're all affected by climate change, but the issues are, very, very divided. So, where does that change come? Do you feel the rhetoric is changing, or what needs to change, for the rhetoric to change in the news or in politics for people to really take this seriously?
Dr. Bedworth?
I'll say quickly so you have a chance as well. I think if you drill down and you look at states, you look at cities, the will is people, as in general, are supportive of climate action. So I actually think we can continue to focus at the federal level, and we should, and there's important decisions happening. But we have to look at the momentum that is happening, I think, at the state and local level. And I think you're going to start to see, and I would say even in Florida, where we're not seeing a rah governor, they are underwater just because they need to act and do something about that. Same in Louisiana. So states where we're not seeing Jerry Brown or a Schwarzenegger or a Newsom or something, So I actually think that is how the change is going to come. And I really do think that's what makes me feel optimistic, is that you're going to see more and more states doing this. We have over half of the states in the U.S. Climate Alliance committed to meeting carbon neutrality, working together to meet carbon neutrality, which I think is even more important. They can collaboratively, if you can do this here, and in Vermont you can do this, in Massachusetts you can do this, you can combine to meet those goals. So we're going to have to get there whether the federal government does it or not, right? And so you're seeing that happening at that subnational level, and I think it's critically important. And people talk about why you should vote for school district and do all that's where people live, and that's where things matter to them. So I just don't think we can discount the importance of that local and community, city, state policy to make this change. So I feel hopeful that that's the wave we'll start to see, even in states where, it's not top of the agenda. You're not going to see them electing someone to Congress on a climate platform, but you might see them elect a mayor. So I think that's a really important dynamic that we have to be focused on to really make that change happen.
Dr. Pullen-Fedenick, you want to add?
Yeah, I would just give a quick anecdotal story. So I was on a flight going from Chicago to D.C., and as people coming to D.C., everyone asks, what do you do, right? So I was on this flight. I was sitting next to a woman and her husband that were from southern Illinois, so more rural parts of the state. And she asked me what I do, and I say, I work in an environmental nonprofit. And she said, oh. And so, it turns out, so she had taken out her book to read, again, and the book was The Greatest Hoax by James Inhofe. And so we talked a bit, we talked about her grandchildren, we talked about, the environment in which she lived. I talked a bit about what I did, again, I'm coming at this from an environmental health perspective. And so, by the end of the flight, she gave me the book and said she didn't need it anymore. Now, there's two ways to interpret this. One, she thought I was just a lunatic and needed to read the truth. The second was I was very persuasive and she didn't need to read that book. But either way, regardless of how it came to be, she wasn't reading it anymore. And so I think that it really is about relationships, right? It's about making sure that people have the messages that bring them to this work. And it could be economic, it could be health. There are lots of ways that people are going to be experiencing climate change, not just through carbon molecules in the atmosphere, but to what's happening in their lives and for families. And so, I think that just being able to talk to folks and, tell them why you care about this work and what you're trying to achieve in the near term is a way to also bring people along.
Thank you for the story. We have time for...
We got two more.
Two more, okay, good.
All right, yeah, hi. My name's Aidan Smith. I was a research fellow at CLEE. Louise was my boss. So, yeah, this question
like,
actually follows up pretty nicely on the comment that was just made. In thinking about building public support for climate change, I can't help but think about the history of the environmental movement, which I think there's a strong argument that it's been based on a lot of saying what people can't have, right? You can't fly, don't drive, don't eat meat, don't use plastic bags, right? And so I'm lately been thinking more and more about how do we make climate change more about abundance and not having less but more. And so some examples of this, two of my favorite anthropologists out of Rice University, for example, a few years ago, did an event called No Carbon Pleasure, Low Carbon Leisure. And so, again, trying to think about how can we reframe this, right, so it doesn't alienate people. Some other ideas that have come up, in Maryland at least, in the press, there's been a lot of news about the 4-day work week. Universal basic income is another idea that I would say could help us break free of this kind of lock we're in around, jobs versus the environment.
Let's take the question.
Yeah. So the question is, are there places or opportunities that people see where we can relate climate policies to things that are not typically thought of as being environmental or climate change policies? What do people think about that?
Who's got the best answer?
Don't drive a Tesla. Your quality of life is not going down when you do that. That's for sure.
Everybody offer one.
Yeah, I was also just going to say, yeah.
Don't drive a Tesla.
Yes, electric vehicles are quieter, smoother. I mean, that's that. You can. For some people, it's going to be a major improvement, and they can equate that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you talk to people who can walk to work, to shop, and to go to school, and they're generally happier people who aren't getting in a car, and so living close to the places you need to be, is a positive.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, talking to people about their health, talking about the individual family savings, right? Really being able to meet people where they are. And so, most Americans can't walk to work, right? And so if you can have energy savings on your bill by being able to, increase the energy efficiency, replacing your windows or applying for programs that allow you to do that, and you save money and improve, the environment within your home, I think those are the kinds of things that, again, we work on at a local level and increasingly at a national level. But I think those are the things that absolutely resonate with folks.
Right. Last one.
Just to say, it's a real concern. I mean, we're not to make light of the challenge. I mean, this is difficult.
Yeah, hi.
Karen, hi.
Karen Metches, former U.S. EPA. I'm retired. I have been spending the last several years as a climate activist at the local level. Appreciate this conversation. And I came because I was keying off the building public will for climate change action is the topic tonight. So I live in a county, Montgomery County locally, where upwards of 80% of the people on a survey believe in climate change, think the government should take action on climate change, believe it's happening. And yet when you try to make changes about individual choices, simple things like, not that anyone's trying to take away their gas-fired stoves, but the idea of taking away people's gas-fired stoves, using non-gasoline fueled local agricultural appliances or leaf blowers, you get a backlash. Like, how do you get people to connect their values on a survey with their choices, both at the individual level, at the home level, and in supporting local political action to actually adopt the policies and the regulations to make these changes. That, there is a disconnect here, and something has to happen somewhere in the communication of this.
Yeah.
So I'd like to hear the panel.
Anybody want to take
I could hop in really quickly.
Yeah.
I think that it depends on the location in which you're working, and I think Montgomery County is an interesting case. We know that people don't respond to fear in rational ways. They also don't respond to punishment. So if you say that someone's going to have to pay 10 cents for a bag versus receiving if you go to the store versus receiving credit for a bag that they bring, they actually will bring bags more frequently if they are receiving a credit. I think that really trying to think about what motivates people in particular communities. So if in Montgomery County, it's you get to have a special sign in your yard that says that you swapped out, your gas stove for something else, or like what are the things, shame can be motivating, potentially, right? But maybe not. I think that some of this is really about understanding the local environment, and so that's going to change based upon specific constituencies too. And so I would really try to think about the ways in which you can highlight again the NIMBYism that does show up. Really try to reward the good behavior and just think about behavior modification through a social psychology standpoint, and then really bring that into the climate activism as well. People aren't going to respond to the same message every time in the same way, and so you really have to have a tailored approach.
Yeah. And as a survey researcher and pollster, I think that there's one thing to have a stance on an issue. It's another thing to agree on the solution to the issue itself. And I think that's where you see a lot of disconnect, both not just on climate change, but on a host of issues. That surveys are a way to assess what people think about things. It's different than when you actually have to act and behave. That's a cost that we don't consider. Last one.
Hi. I just wanted to say something on behalf of the Cal Alumni Club of Washington, D.C. I'm the president of the club. My name is Vicki Brademan. I have a degree in French, class of 1973, and a law degree from the law school formerly known as Bolt Hall and now known as Berkeley Law, in case you're not aware that the name has changed. I see a lot of our club members here tonight. If any of you are here who are not members of the Cal Alumni Club and on our newsletter, come talk to us at the end of the meeting, because we really need to get you on the list so you can hear about all the other stuff that's going on that our club is organizing. I really want to thank our panel and also University Development and Alumni Relations for putting this event together. It's really not an easy thing to do, but it is a wonderful thing that they do for us. And they've done a few, and I hope they're going to do some more. And the other thing I would just want to put a pitch in, and many of you know that we have a fabulous summer internship program called Cal in the Capital. And we have usually 60 to 70 students who come here and spend 10 weeks in the summer living at the UCDC, the Washington Center. They are coming the weekend of Memorial Day. They'll all start being here. We know that a lot of them do not yet have internships. And if you have ideas for internships, please come talk to us. Our club member, Betsy Keenan over here, is our coordinator for Cal in the Capital, and we're going to be sending out a list of thumbnail bios for the students that are coming with little descriptions of what they're looking for. But the last time we had one of these events last May, we actually got a job for at least one intern just by talking to you guys. So put your thinking caps on and come talk to Betsy or me if you have an idea right now. That would be super to know about. Thanks so much.
Thank you,
for
Madam
being here.
President. Thank you. Yes.
Since Vicki didn't ask a question, may I claim her question? I'm her secretary.
Have we paid for extra time? Are we good?
If not,
Sure.
okay. Really quickly.
Wait for the mic. Wait for the mic, please. Just wait for the mic.
You have to wait for the microphone to. No, we had two.
Too many obstacles. Thank you. Yeah, I'll make it quick. But following up on the question asked by our colleague from Montgomery County, one thing I've noticed in logistics is people want their packages delivered faster and faster to their homes. That's one of the downsides of e-commerce. And it's clear that quicker deliveries have higher carbon footprints because the delivery companies don't have time to lay out the package routes in the most in the most conservative way. And it's a fascinating question because I see a lot of people who do say, you know, I am very concerned about the carbon footprint, but damn it, I want that package of M&Ms now. I don't want to wait 3 hours for that package of M&Ms. And how do you, I mean, I don't know how you educate people on that. So it's kind of a quandary, maybe not a question. But thank you all.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and of course, you know, we know plenty of stories of educating people and then someone counter-educating them. So there's always a kind of a trade-off in the messaging, and we hope that we can just keep coming up with good strategy here. Thank you all for attending. Thank you all for supporting what we're doing here at Berkeley, and thank you to the panel for offering your wisdom. Thank you. Please feel free to stay and question them more and enjoy food and beverage.